Welcome to this episode of Why Pals Tales from the Superyacht Laundry. Now, I have we've had Kat on as a guest before, and I really wanted her to come back on to actually talk more in depth about what she actually does, because we've heard her story about how she ended up on yachts and then coming off, but I think it would be really, really good for listeners to understand what you're doing now properly and how it benefits and what you're observing in the industry. So thank you for coming on again.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you again.
Yes, well, it's like I said at the end of the last interview that we did, what you're doing, I see there is a group of people actually that are doing really amazing brand new things. And, we really are at the forefront of realizing that a lot of crew wellness, as they like to call crew wellness, I think that's a bit of a naff term, but like crew wellness is all linked together with performance, on board.
But I think the term wellness, I think a lot of people, what I'm trying to do is get into true wellness. And a lot of people have they're missing the mark in what true wellness is, because a lot of it is so tied up in diet culture and kind of wankery information, like non-scientific information. And so I'm trying to change the conversation from diet culture and biohacking and all that kind of stuff into actual longevity and performance. And because it's such a high demanding industry, so we need to tackle the issues that crew are facing from upstream, right? I mean, there's so much being done with the downstream, which is kind of like the all the mental health first aid and all that kind of stuff is amazing, but that's like that's crisis mode. What's happening at the top? So
I've just come back from Mets and been to the forum, and obviously there's a lot of talk now, because obviously crew wellness, whether that's mental health, physical health or whatever, goes in hand with crew retention, and that was a big topic that we covered, that was covered at the forum. So it's all linked together. But before we go into what's going on in the industry right now. And we'll just do a little bit of a refresh. So obviously Kat was a stewardess on board, and then you decided to go back to uni to do nutrition. But doing nutrition for crew wasn't your first thought, was it?
No, so the yacht nutritionist was not my plan. It kind of just happened, which is so great and it's so fun and I love what I'm doing. There's so much purpose in it. But during my university studies, I was involved in a huge research project that took us years. And I was working with PhDs, and it was so exciting and it was groundbreaking, all this information that we were getting from, it spanned 6 different economical powerhouse countries. So it was like UK, Australia, USA, Canada, New Zealand. That's 5 countries. And it was a long time ago now, but it was just so exciting. I loved the research. I loved the data that we were seeing, because we could literally graph it on charts of what kind of food was being served to children at restaurants and how the governmental policies did have an impact on that. Because sometimes, you think, oh, these government policies of you can't have X amount of sodium in such a, food for children or adults even. You don't really see the impact of that, but we were able to see the impact of it. And actually Australia came out as the worst, which you wouldn't think. But
were you shocked when you were obviously going into these research projects and you started learning? Were you actually shocked at the state of nutrition of people on the planet? Do you know what I mean? Like you think, I'm not sure I'm not that bad, but it is quite bad.
It is. And it still is shocking to, when you go to a public health facility, like a hospital or somewhere like that, and you see the food that's being served, it is pretty shocking. But I wanted to go into research, more so to do with the gut microbiome. And that's where my real passion was. I just loved research. I loved being at the forefront of technology as well, and what's being developed for the human gut microbiome and everything. And it was really fascinating. But I graduated uni, and during my years at uni, as I chatted about in our last podcast, I was temping on boats. And a lot of the girls, once I graduated, said, hey, I love your philosophy. I love your ethos about food. I truly embody what I believe and what I teach my clients. And I said, hey, can I work with you? And then I found myself having 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 clients that were all yacht stews. And so I said to Val, I was like, hey, should I just start an Instagram page called The Yacht Nutritionist? And he was like, yeah, go for it. Why not? And then I did. And so we're here.
It's one of those, I'm a firm believer of kind of going with the flow. It wasn't probably on your radar, but it makes perfect sense that women on board would be struggling. There are so many different factors, So you're nutritionists, you've got obviously current crew members reaching out to you going, I see what you're doing. It's quite interesting. Do you think that was is that a cry for help, or is that in natural interest, or, it was the struggle that they felt like they were going through? Like maybe
I know that when my clients work with me, they've basically tried everything else, and they're coming from the place of diet culture. They're not happy with their bodies. They do want to have, some weight loss and stuff like that, but they're feeling the stigma of the body image and the pressures of body image on board. They're finding themselves eating food that they don't really want to be eating. So the crew mess, unfortunately, is full of ultra processed foods, which, as we know, does not contribute to a healthy gut microbiome whatsoever. And they want support and they want guidance. And I've created something that they really align with and resonate with. And I basically created something that gives them freedom from all that, from food and your body occupying so much headspace. And I think I just really embody just such a fresh and modern approach to the whole weight loss conversation, to the whole, well-being conversation that is really appealing, because I am doing something that's fresh, that's different, that is also, I have proof of the pudding. My clients are having incredible transformations, physical transformations, but it's also coming first from a mental transformation and how they think about food, how they think about their bodies and themselves. And yeah, it's really powerful.
It's obviously I don't know. I've probably been on loads of diets. So what did I do? I did a diet whilst I was on board.
The master cleanse, that's a big one.
It was just, it was basically shakes, really. There was a shake and meal substitutes. So obviously,
I think Herbalife is still
one meal a day.
Yeah, Herbalife is still around, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's just, I know after a yard period, I, as you do, put on a bit of weight. And we were in the yard in Palma, and the crew the workers' canteen and stuff, everything was deep fried. Oh my God. It was, everything on the menu was deep fried. There wasn't, there was barely any salad on there. So obviously, a few.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's what I mean with there is such a problem with nutrition globally. And my ethos is I basically have no restrictions. I eat everything, but one thing I generally won't eat is fried food. Mostly because I just don't like it. It's dripping in oil. It doesn't make me feel good. I'm sluggish afterwards. It's horrible. And secondly, it's terrible for you.
Yeah, it's lots of I was quite so the cheap food in Spain, again, it's a bit like the cheap food in the UK. It's generally deep fried. It's there's not a green thing anywhere near it. Which shocked me in a way, because obviously using great tapas and all of these things. You can get it, but it generally costs to get it. But obviously
exactly.
we're talking about on board. So obviously you've been working with ladies on board for a while now. Would you say it's quite a rife place for a distorted body image?
Oh, for sure.
Because
Yeah, I think that's kind of the major issue that I'm battling with is body image issues because of obviously the pressures of what you look like and the squirt size. But for example, you'll have one girl on the team maybe talking about her diet or talking about how much weight she's lost recently because she hasn't been fueling herself properly on charter, and she's using charter as a means to kind of cut because she's so busy. And she's like, oh, great. Like I can skip lunch because I'm so busy. First of all, you can't skip lunch. You need the fuel to be able to give yourself, the right nutrients to power through that 16-hour day feeling good, because it's not just about looking good. You have to feel good while you're doing it, or else you're just living a fake life. No one wants to do that. You're just faking it, right? But you'll have this one girl and she's lost a lot of weight on that couple charters that she's been doing, maybe some back-to-back charters, and she's using it as a way to restrict. And she's like, oh my God, look at me. Like I've lost so much weight. Oh my God, I've got down a squirt size. And this starts to have an effect on the other girls on the team. And they're like, oh, like maybe I should start cutting food too, and then we'll have someone try to cut food. There's a lot of people who do struggle with the binge and restrict cycle. So once you start restricting, it's going to backfire and you're going to start binging. And unfortunately on yachts, you have all of those highly palatable foods, high sugar, high fat, high salt, those ultra processed foods available at your fingertips. So it's the perfect place for binge because it's also going to be replaced. Like no one's going to really notice that 10 Snickers bars have gone missing. I mean, they'll just like, oh, we'll just buy some more, because it's an unlimited budget.
it is that, you do sometimes just don't have time. I remember the worst was being a chief stew for me. Like I literally only ate when I felt like I was, my hunger levels were like high. Like I need to eat something. And then depending on what time of day that actually hit me would be what I could actually access. Mid-charter, the chances of me sitting down and trying to eat a meal without trying to do something else at the other was pretty bad. So obviously on board, you don't have any control about what you're going to have access to. Okay, unless you're the chief stew, which you get to go shopping and provision, you don't have any. I suppose you could get food and put it in your cabin, but it's probably not recommended. So that's kind of
that's usually not allowed.
Like that. Yeah. So you kind of restricted on what you can do. So let's start. So let's start with obviously what in an ideal world, you're on charter. Let's say you are supposed to have 3 meals a day. What would the most optimum kind of setup be for a crew member?
So let's say you're on early housekeeping and you have to get up. It's a 5 a.m. start. Nobody wants to eat that early. Therefore, the early team should be given about 10 to 15 minutes, say around 7:30, 8 o'clock, to have a bit of a breakfast, right? And then, so they've had something to eat, and then that holds them until 12. So ideally, you do want to be consuming something to keep your blood sugar levels stable every 4 hours. It's not impossible to do on charter because you're kind of doing it anyway, because the girls are always snacking in the pantries. They're popping chocolates into their mouth in the housekeeping cupboard. It's happening, right? They are eating. So that you have to allow the crew to have it's 10 minutes. That's all you need to kind of, you are scoffing and you are eating quickly. That's going to be happening. You're not going to be having a half an hour lunch break on charter, that's for sure. But you can eat mindfully, even though you're under pressure and you're under stress, to only have, 10 minutes to eat something. But basically, for the early girls, they have to have an allotted time for breakfast. They'll have lunch around 12, probably another little snack, even if it's you just sneaking to your bathroom to have a protein bar and maybe a few little fruits in your hand or something. Like maybe you need to sneak something around 3 or 4 o'clock to have a quick little snack. But often I say, so crew dinner is at 5. This is unrealistic for majority of people. And I actually preferred to be on service, like on late service, because I hated having dinner at 5 p.m. because it just completely threw me off, because I found I was just randomly eating then all through the night. So I was never hungry at 5 p.m. Like that was such a weird time for me physiologically to eat. But you do have to get yourself into the rhythm of the boat. And that's what I say with my clients, is that you do have to learn how to get into the rhythm of the boat, because the boat's not going to change for you. Right.
It's
So
really like when I was early, so when I was like housekeeping and stuff like that, and obviously getting up at that time, I always tried, you know, I forced myself to, like I did, even if I didn't feel like breakfast, I'd always force myself. Like I generally, my go-to was like oats, because otherwise I'd literally get to 8 o'clock and I would be starving, like not just a little bit hungry, but like ravenous. Because obviously in the morning you do all of the guest areas, then the guests start getting up and you're straight into doing cabins. If I didn't have anything in my stomach, like I would be beyond ravenous. Like it would be a distraction because I'd be so hungry and probably thirsty as well, because obviously we're not even talking about fluids.
No, for sure. I mean, ideally that's the best case scenario, because your food will keep you stable, and we want to prevent you from being ravenous. You don't want to get to the point where you're so hungry, because then anything goes. You're not able to make the best choices for yourself that align with your values, whether that's losing weight, ideally not, because, but it's okay if someone values losing weight, but I mean, just for your health and for your well-being and for your energy, that's the kind of stuff to support you working such long hours. That's the stuff that I'm interested in, is long-term longevity and well-being.
What's the damage you do to your body if you've done 3-week charter working, generally 16-hour days? And if you're not, by the end of that, if you're not eating properly, you're snacking on Snickers bars, you're kind of haphazard, probably a lot of carb loading, what kind of damage do you do to your body by the time you're finished?
It's a hormonal train wreck. So basically we're going to be talking elevated cortisol, disrupted gut microbiome. So the wrong type of gut bacteria that are starting to take over the good gut bacteria, your hormones, so your stress hormones. You're probably going to be seeing like acne, puffiness, water retention. You're not going to be comfortable. And this is what happens, is that the girls will tend to eat this way on charter. I mean, they'll eat like shit. They're eating shit. They're eating the ultra processed foods. They feel like shit after charter, and they're like, right, juice cleanse. They go so far in the other direction, but they don't learn how to support themselves through charter to get through in a healthier way.
It's I'm thinking back, like, this is really interesting talking to you, because obviously all I do is think about like how I ate on board, and not the bad habits. I mean, one owner, and they loved like macaroons. I used to just shove one in my mouth whole. They were very discreet, really. You could literally stick a hole.
They melt so quickly.
Easy, like one whole one straight in there, carry on doing what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? Terrible. But even back then I knew, it's like the sugar is so good, but that with every high there is a low.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're gonna be all right. And then obviously coffee, which is abused.
Totally.
How many cups of coffee should you have a day, would you say?
I think it's 3. I think it's 3 cups of coffee. It's about, I think the maximum is 600 milligrams of caffeine. So it's actually quite a lot of caffeine. But I might be wrong. I don't quite remember, but I think it's 600 milligrams of caffeine is the maximum limit. So, what is there? There's 87 milligrams of caffeine in an espresso, 87 to 100. That's 6 espressos. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I wouldn't sleep.
Yeah, but there are 2 different types of caffeine metabolizers. So there's like a type A caffeine metabolizer and type B, and this all has to do with how your liver, genetically, how someone's liver metabolizes coffee. So a type B is someone who metabolizes it quite slowly, and there's someone who metabolizes it very rapidly. I'm a type B, and I metabolize it slowly, and it gives me the jitters. Like I actually can't drink caffeine because I'm so sensitive to any kind of caffeine stimulation. I get really jittery, anxiety, like heart palpitations. I start sweating. So caffeine for those individuals is actually not recommended because it has,
I did never think. Well, I don't know. I'm getting on in my days, so I'm becoming super sensitive to caffeine.
Yeah.
I can't drink caffeine past lunchtime, really. Even Diet Coke.
You can't sleep.
Like if I was,
yeah,
it really affects my.
I buy caffeine-free Diet Coke. The Coke Zero caffeine-free. It's great.
It is. Is it great? I don't know. I always feel bad. Like it's one of those things you get into the habit of it. You know, it's like I don't really need a Diet Coke, but it is that taste thing. It's I always go back to the one person that I asked, you know, what coffee did they want, and they wanted a decaf cappuccino but with almond milk. I'm like, well, just drink something else. There's nothing in it that is it, you know. So if I have Diet Coke but with no caffeine, no sugar, like I might as well drink something else. But it is, you do get, it's a habit.
Exactly the same.
But it's a habit, you know. It's the Diet Coke thing is not really a drink because I'm thirsty or anything. Like it's just a habit taste, you know. You get into
it's a sweet treat basically, and that's how I see them. I see a Diet Coke as, you know, oh, I'll just have a nice little like refreshing sweet treat. Basically, that's what it is for me.
What are the main problems that crew create for themselves because of bad choices?
So yeah, it's a tough question because there's so many compounding factors. You cannot just isolate it to one thing. It's not just black and white, but the compounding factors are all the ultra processed foods in the crew mess, the diet culture that is on board, the self-proclaimed nutritionists who think that they're doing the right things, but they're actually making the complete wrong choices for their health and for their well-being on board. And they're also kind of like really vocal about it and about what they're doing with their food and their nutrition and their body. Thirdly, we have to talk about what's coming out of the galley on some vessels. It's absolutely appalling. Not all the time, but you know, that is something I'm very passionate about. And it's just not good enough for us to be in such a luxurious industry as we are. And there's such high pressures on the crew for performance, for appearance, for their well-being. It's not good enough. And three, obviously the alcohol in the industry is a problem. But I am noticing there is a slight shift on a very, very minuscule level of crew wanting to be on vessels that don't have such a heavy drinking culture. And crew are even happy to work on dry boats because they've had such bad experiences on other vessels of just being completely out of control and wild parties, and they're suffering for weeks after these parties, and you know, you can't say no and all this stuff, and yeah, it's all consuming. So
yeah, I mean, it's, you know, everything on board is all consuming because you're living and breathing it. So obviously after talking to these individuals, you know, you've got clients now that you're trying to support whilst living on board. What's the main challenges that, you know, if you're starting to reflect on your own food, you know, how much control can they have? You know, how much can they?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I do is I definitely tell them, or we work together for them to create a better provisionings list and for better options in the crew mess. And for my stews, let's say, even if I have a junior stew, you know, I'm educating her more in how to read labels. And so what's a better granola to have on board? And so other crew, you know, she can help educate as well. So it's kind of, you know, I've worked with crew on over 50 vessels now, which is super cool. And to see
amazing.
how that crew mess is changing slightly, there's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done, because also then you run into the problem of the chief stew who has 12 years experience not really wanting to listen to someone who's only been on board only 1 year experience, right? It's kind of like know your place type of hierarchy in the industry that is existent.
It's also a habit though, isn't it? If you've got a chief stew that, like, you know, like you're saying, like when it comes to peak season, she's loving life because she's using that to diet at the same time. So by the time she finishes season, she's slim and trim. And she's been doing that for the last 10 years.
No, but she knows. She knows it's not sustainable, and she's sick of the yo-yo. I have chief stews that have come to me after being in the industry for 12 years and living this way, and they're at rock bottom, and they're so burnt out. They're so mentally, physically exhausted. They don't have the energy anymore, and they're just done. They're like, "Oh my God, Kat, like, what is food freedom? I need a piece of this food freedom because I'm so sick of living my life this way." And that's what it's like. That's why I say the people who work with me, they're done. They're done with diet culture. They're done with that conversation of, the heavy restriction on charter, and then off season, they're just, they're rebounding and they're gaining so much weight. They're sick of the yo-yo.
Yeah, you just keep going through cycles. How much does obviously it's being obsessed with women, and obviously knowing that I have bloody menopause on the horizon is possibly the most depressing thing ever. But obviously, having done and spoken to individuals like yourself, our bodies are changing. So like by the strike of 30, it's like, oh, everything will change when you're 30. Things actually are physically changing from, around 30. So obviously, how much does that play a factor? Because,
huge. But also, I mean, you have to bring into the conversation, we're not educated on what is happening with our monthly hormonal cycles, which is so important. Before my degree, I had no idea what was happening with my hormones monthly. And it's just something that's kind of brushed off, and women are made fun of, like, oh, are you on your period, or like something like that. But actually something physiologically, hormonally is happening internally. And some people respond in very negative ways to that. And some, it's a spectrum, right? Some people are affected severely by their monthly cycles, and some people not so much. But, yeah.
Was it obviously one of the main reasons women leave? Is to have children. How much can getting into like a crazy diet habit affect? Could have a knock-on effect hormonally, then ultimately fertility-wise. Like, is there any research into that? Like,
what was the first part of the question? Sorry, you just broke up. I think our Wi-Fi is not so strong.
Talking about, so obviously nutrition affects hormones. Hormones can ultimately affect fertility, and especially with the fact that yachties gamble until the very end before they get off the boat to then start having a family, which we're just about to do some episodes on fertility and the gamble of waiting until you're 30 or in your 30s.
You don't have as much time as you think, or what social media is making it out to seem. Like, it seems like, oh, we can have children until we're 40. You can't.
But is there a knock-on effect from like nutrition to fertility? Or it's all just
for
general,
sure. I mean,
really?
it's all connected, definitely. I mean, you want to follow a low inflammation diet. I mean, that's the healthiest way for someone to live their life, to have balanced hormones and to be feeling good and have vitality. Is you have to lower inflammation systemically within your body. That's, making sure you're having enough fiber, lean protein, omega-3s, heart healthy fats, plethora of your fruits and veggies, and limiting alcohol to, on occasion, no binge drinking, no binge eating. One of my clients, I think I said this on the last episode, she was actually bulimic, and now for 12 years, she was chief stew bulimic for 12 years, and now she's pregnant. So your body, it can recover, and it will recover and bounce back as long as you know that you're doing the right things and not following, as I say, that wellness wankery information that's out there.
What are the latest wellness trends that you're horrified with?
Well, I think still fasting. So that's a really big one. And a lot of girls on board, they're not eating until about 10 o'clock. So they're starting their shift at 8. So boss off, they're starting their shift at 8. They're eating at 10. Then they're also eating lunch at noon. And so they're kind of stuck in this cycle of not listening to their bodies, because they've heard holding off breakfast is really good for you and super healthy, but you're eating at 10, eating at noon. You're constantly over full, right? Like it's not a good feeling. And so it's perpetuating that cycle of losing touch with your hunger and your fullness hormones already. I think the latest the latest kind of like wellness wankery trend, there's just so many. I mean, I think colonics is probably one that recently I was very shocked to hear of
Whoa.
how popular that was, especially, yeah. And this was
What do we
actually,
mean, colonics? You can't do that at work, can you?
no, this is coming from this is a male chef, actually, land-based. And he asked me, he said, should I be doing this? I'm like, definitely not. He's like, oops. I'm like, what do you mean? We're messaging back and forth. I'm helping him with his nutrition. He's great. He's super cool. But he's like, oops, should I not have done it? I'm like, well, how many times have you done it? And I think he said once or twice a week for the past 6 weeks. And he's saying he's struggling.
Christ.
He's saying he's struggling with bloating, constant fatigue. He's looking after himself. I mean, this is just because it was heavily promoted from that wellness culture that isn't actually well at all. So basically,
and it doesn't feel violated. Like, that's a lot of, action in an area that, I don't want to question his sexuality, but like, no, just, you might be doing something for a one-off, but not like twice a week.
You get addicted to it actually because it feels very kind of like you feel so light afterwards. You feel like you've really cleaned yourself out, but what you're cleaning out is your gut microbiome. And I was like, you need to be focusing on fermented foods because you've flushed out your microbiome. You've literally just like shoved a whole bunch of water in there and they've all come right out.
Lovely. Oh, it always just amazes me what trends next. Like, what is next?
That's what I mean with the
I always remember that one. Was it Beyonce that did that cayenne pepper and lemon and like
that's the master cleanse? Yeah, that's the master cleanse. That was really popular when I was working on boats with my chief stew 12 years ago. She was on the master cleanse. She was always on it, always trying it. She'd do the master cleanse for a month and then eat a whole bunch of food, then do the master cleanse again. But going back to the colonics thing, this is what I mean with biohacking. And there are some biohacking technologies or techniques or tools or strategies that are beneficial for human health. Like one of them is, biohack your sleep, like try and get as much sleep as you can, which is great. I mean, in yachting, it's kind of impossible. But this is what I mean. Whereas if you're getting your information and it's touted as being the best thing for your health, like what this guy believed with the colonics, it's absolutely not. It's false information.
I mean, sleep is a major factor. I know that especially when you're, for me, chief stew, you're just wound up all the time and it's really hard to wind down. But there's like trends now. It's melatonin tablets, just to try and lots of calming. But they're herbal remedies really to just try and get into a deeper sleep.
Ashwagandha, all that kind of stuff.
So having obviously worked with a number of individuals that are on board and trying to come to terms with their relationship with food and changing it, how much of a part is the galley in this? So when I think back to my time on board, I felt quite lucky. My chefs, what they put out, nice food. I had the best homemade burger of my entire life with the best coleslaw and like the veggies, like one in particular, like what he could do with vegetables was quite amazing. Like I ended up expanding my palate because the vegetables that he was kind of cooking up were just, they were brand new to me, but they tasted incredible. So I always felt myself quite lucky. The healthiest I've probably ever eaten in my life was on board, because I'm terrible at home because I have no interest in cooking whatsoever, much to my husband's dismay. So I'm just not, I can cook, but I'm just not, like, I would just eat very plain, stir-fried vegetables and a piece of protein, and then I'd be quite happy to have that meal again and again. Like, I'm not fussed, really. I've not got a lot of interest in food that way. But I know not all boats are like that. And I have told you the story about the fact that cold McDonald's got me fired once.
I love this story. It's such a good story. Because there's a lot. Go on. Go ahead.
If anything's going to get you fired, it's losing your rag because of cold McDonald's. I lost it.
So you basically shouted because tell us the story. It's a great story.
I will just revisit the story. So basically, first experience on boats, Russian owners, they just never got off. It was like second month. They were just like, no time off. Everybody's getting a bit narky. I started with a really amazing chef called Dave. Still lives in Parma. Like, I love him. He's one of the best chefs I've ever, been around. His food was incredible and still is incredible. Shout out to Dave if he ever listen. He won't listen to this.
I should go see Dave. Go hang out with him in Parma.
Yeah, no, we're still in touch. But he was like my first experience with an incredible chef on board. But he quit because the boat was turning into a nightmare, and we got an Italian chef. And it was just a lot of pasta and a lot of oil, and there wasn't much fresh stuff knocking around. So obviously by the time we got to the second month, like, if he's dishing out this stuff, that's fine. But then there was just one day, like, the guests got off. The chief steward and captain chef got off to provision. They were gone for 7 hours to provision. I think they just went and had to sit down. I would probably have done it as well. They had lunch.
Sure.
Like,
happens all the time.
For me, it's okay. But that's fine. Don't care. But literally, obviously, he came back and they just came back with bags and bags of cold McDonald's and just put it on the crew mess table. And then that was what we were supposed to eat. Like, I'm not a prim. Like, it's not like I wouldn't eat McDonald's, but the McDonald's chips are disgusting when they're cold.
When they're cold.
Like, they're not, it's not something you can reheat. Like, once they're cold, they're cold. But I was tired and exhausted, and I just lost it. I was like, what the fuck is this?
No.
I was like, rah, we've all been working really hard. Where the hell have you been for all of these? Like, it was it. That was it. And then the next day I got fired.
No, I mean, good for you. I think that's incredible that you were able to speak up and say something. But then again, we're not allowed to speak up and say anything, right? Because you're a junior, and that's the part of the whole hierarchy thing in yachting. And the chefs are amazing. They do their jobs phenomenally. They're fantastic. They are world-class chefs, but the math is just not mathing. 2 + 2 is not equaling 4, because we have, as I said before, the pressures of body image, the pressures of high performance in the industry, the long hours. We need to fuel the crew with better food. You said that you were super lucky to work with a chef that did really care about the crew's food. And it's actually not even a question of caring, because I know the chefs do care. It's more so a question of having the access to fresh food, the resources, the energy. They're also I think the chefs are the hardest workers on the boat. I mean, they need more help. They're cooking for, let's say, 22 crew, and all the dishes and everything. Maybe there's 2 of them in the galley, but it's just not adding up. And for one, crew food should never be deep fried, or if it is, once a month, right? There should be some kind of because I'm not saying regulation, but there should be some kind of rules, because anything goes. And when you're tired, yes, it's so easy to just chuck something into the deep fryer and just put it out into the crew mess, right? I mean, I get it, but this is actually funny you mentioned McDonald's, because one of my clients, who I'm really working hard with her to repair her relationship with food. And she said to me yesterday, she's like, Kat, I'm at wit's end now. Like, we've just moved back onto the boat. The chef's been out provisioning. There's 2 of them on board. Yesterday, their options for dinner was, do you want McDonald's or do you want pizza? And then she was like, oh, well, can I get something else, like a little bit more nutrient dense. And she gets made fun of for asking for something else. Like, oh, it's not good enough for you. Are you too good to have McDonald's? That's not the problem. It's more so like, I need better fuel, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened in that's why I ended up getting fired, because the whole crew turned against me. Like, oh, they're busy,
yeah.
you know, can't you just this once? I'm like, but we've like, I'm knackered.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
we've also been working.
Do anything.
But then also, I mean, when you are working those 16-hour days, a lot of the time, the one thing that you look forward to is having a nice meal in the crew mess when you're on charter and you come down to the crew mess, and let's say it's your options are fish and chips or pork belly. And you just look at that. And as, you know, as a female that likes to look after themselves and cares about their wellness and their well-being, and they want to feel good, I would look at that and be like, well, fucking thanks, guys. Right? Like, okay, I'm going to make myself like a tuna and rice bowl, but then I got shit for making myself a tuna and rice bowl. You know what I mean? Like, it's not adding up.
I think it is a bit of an issue, because obviously, like we've said, you've got the different fatty diets, and chefs do get asked to kind of participate and kind of, I'm on a diet, you know, and obviously we've not even touched on the vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian issue, which I know from a chef's perspective, they'll try and be as accommodating as possible. But like you said, in their insane hours, you know, it's just another thing for them to do. Surely there's a way where we can work all of that out. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a way to kind of help support.
Exactly.
chefs.
I mean, and that's what I mean. That's where they need more support. And I see it. I have chef clients working with me. I know the hours they're pulling. I mean, I've worked on boats, and it's crazy. They need more help. They need more support. That's where, like, a nutritionist working with a chef, it is a powerhouse. When this guy I was talking about with the colonics, he's an incredible chef. He knows, like, he can make the most incredible food, but then now powered with me, it's just like, whoa, okay. He's like, I don't know as much about food as I thought I knew. Right. He's like, my ego has completely like gone away. And I'm like, it's just fun. We're laughing. We're having a good time working about all these things together. And yeah, it's super cool. But that's where, we're coming from. Chefs are incredible at making food taste amazing. And I'm trying to keep the nutritional density and the nutritional kind of efficacy of the food and pair that together. And it's, wow, like, that's an unstoppable combination.
Well, it's always one of those things, it's with that daydream. If I was a millionaire, billionaire, I would literally, like I said to you, I've got real no interest in food. Like, I'm not. I love nice food. I will go to a restaurant and I will, try something amazing, and I'm really keen, but just me cooking it. So my dream scenario, if I was loaded, would be that I would talk to my chef and say, I don't really care what you cook me, but can you not give me something that is going to make me put on weight? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or make it nutritional. But I don't want tons of food. You've got that. I mean, that's the guest experience.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's what we want.
Really nice food.
We want that incredible flavor profile, but paired with the macronutrients and micronutrients that contribute to longevity. And that's the conversations that we need to be having, and working with chefs. I mean, yeah, they're doing an incredible job, but there definitely there needs to be more support.
Yeah, there needs to be more support, and just the conversation in it. It shouldn't, I don't think it would be that difficult with their knowledge to start really putting out frameworks to kind of, ultimately support the crew. It would be a tweak. And I think they might find a bit of peace in it, because they would know then. Do you know what I mean? It's like they know how to do it and how to structure it. So it's not just standing in the galley going, what the hell am I going to cook the crew this week?
But I understand as well, it's difficult because you're also kind of cooking for two different, the two different genders. So you'll have the guys who are so super active outside, and they come in and they can eat more nutrient or calorie dense foods. Because of the output, they are putting out so much more energy, and they need higher intake, which is basically like more nutrient density and calories and that kind of stuff. Then you have the girls who kind of want to eat more light and fresh and healthy. So you have that combination of two. And then, you know, the guys will come down to the crew mess and be like, oh, it's quinoa today. You know, like they'll kind of make fun of something that's a little bit more nutrient, more
It's
appropriate.
also nationalities, you know, like what they used to at home. Like chefs do have like, it's pretty tough. But I think it's, like I said, so at the beginning, you know, after coming back from the Superyacht Forum in Amsterdam, you know, this conversation is only going to continue. Just like mental health is not going to go away. If your diet, you know, all of these things are interlinked. If your diet and nutrition on board with, you know, crappy food, and then not adhering to hours of rest, couple that with, you know, obviously, you know, bad body image, and then you've got mental health issues, all of these things are kind of interlinked. I do feel like we're heading in a direction where one's not isolated from the other. It's kind of got to look, you know, a bit more of a holistic.
Wellness, right? That is the wellness approach. And that's what I mean by true wellness, is getting all these little bubbles and they're all connected. So what is that called? It's not a Venn diagram. It's like a spider graph kind of thing. What's that called? I don't know what it's called. But what we need is, yes, these conversations are so important, but then we have to have a strategic plan, and we need boots on the ground, because it's not just up to the chief steward, to the captain, or to the chief officer, right? Like they are professionals in their field, but they're not professionals for wellness and well-being and nutritionists and psychologists and, you know, interior kind of management and coaching and all that kind of stuff. Like they have their profession. That's where the professionals have to come in to implement the strategy that needs to happen for the support that's needed.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's heading in the right direction, but I do think somebody like yourself will need to be at the forefront of these conversations, you know. And then, to be honest, you know, you're talking to individuals like chefs know all of this stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like they know how to create, like you said, amazing food. It is just the final piece in the puzzle to make it nutritious. And also that's another fantastic string, you know, to their bow for the guests. You know, this is not just something that affects, you know, the crew members. Obviously our needs are quite specific, but more and more guests are after now, especially high net worth clients. They want nutrition, you know, they want... Could you imagine if the yacht chef, maybe, for example, they could have like a consultation with a nutritionist during the charter, or for the charter, or for the guests, for the owners, and having some coaching of how to tailor the food to keep the nutritional integrity of the dish tailored to that person's, you know, wellness and well-being. For example, like, if that person has trouble sleeping, okay, let's choose meats that are higher in tryptophan, higher in magnesium, that we have the calming effect. Also, we're using lavender, we have chamomile in there. You know, this kind of like synergistic pairing of food. And it's kind of like, it's almost like a new kind of trajectory of nutrition for the ultra high net worth. Right. That's kind of the vision that I see. That's where nutrition is going on board for yachts. It's like, it's really, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's quite exciting at the same time, but it's just, I mean, we had a documentary in the UK about, they wanted to know about what these high processed foods were doing to children's brains. They didn't experiment on children. But a guy used himself as a guinea pig, and it rerouted the want factors in the brain. So like the food that we're eating is laced with stuff to make it non-filling but really addictive, you know. And I think society is coming to, it's a day of reckoning. We're just realizing that we are being manipulated by our food, just like marketing can manipulate you to want the next, you know, iPhone or whatever. Food is being tampered with, and none of us.
My whole body gets goosebumps at this conversation, because it is. I mean, that's what food chemistry is, and you have a whole team of food chemists, scientists in labs, in Kellogg's, in Denon, in Unilever, making the food so highly palatable, it becomes addictive, right? And it's not filling. So you always just want to keep having more and more and more. And it's yeah, I mean, that's their full-time job, is to make it as palatable as possible.
It's crazy because there was a book I read, like How to Think Yourself Thin, and there's an exercise in it where you just taste the food, like really try hard to taste like an ultra processed food, and like, what taste does it have? Does it have any taste? And you find out that a lot of these high processed foods don't really have any taste, but it is weird because you feel like it tastes incredible. But if you actually concentrate and try to taste the different things that are going on in your mouth, there's nothing there.
I think for me, it would be, it's my sugar receptors, and I'm a sweet tooth, 100%. And for me, it would be the sugar receptors in my mouth, those taste receptors, then send the signals to my brain of pleasure, right? So in that moment, you were just talking about that, and I was kind of thinking of, having like a milk chocolate, right? Because a dark chocolate is a little bit more richer, it has a little bit more density to it, but the milk chocolate gives me a lot more pleasure. And it's that pleasure response in my brain, that dopamine, that seeks out continuously that response from the food. And it's completely consuming.
It's really scary. Like at the end of the documentary that I watched, the guy had his brain scanned again after going back to his normal diet, and the receptors and stuff hadn't gone back to normal. So once we've been contaminated, like once we've done this to ourselves, there's no research yet to say it's actually reversible. Because once you've created that want and that these foods, it's actually terrifying. Like, it's one of the weird things that's going on in society across the Western world at this moment in time, where you don't want to think that there's a big conspiracy or there's a big bad anything out there, but there is something fundamentally wrong with what has happened to our food.
To the food supply.
Yeah. Like literally from the 70s, everything changed. So what the hell happened? And that was before you even get onto genetics, being genetically disposed to be overweight or rounder or whatever. So it's a never-ending topic.
No, it's fascinating. And that's why I wanted to work in research, because this stuff, it consumes me because I find it so interesting. But then again, also with what I'm doing in regards to repairing people's relationships with food, it's so fascinating to see the journey of, let's say, like my client's journey of everything they've done and what they've gone through their whole lives, to get to where they want to work with me, right? And then we start to work together and we see that transformation. It's fascinating. And to see how they think about food, how they think about themselves and their bodies, and then how we can change that together. It's really interesting.
Well, obviously, I've got to wrap it up because we could talk for ages, couldn't we, about these things? I find it really, really fascinating. We didn't even get into, the buzzwords, Ozempic and all of that jazz yet, but we can maybe, because I've actually heard of people taking it on board. True.
I actually have I have 2 clients on board taking Ozempic.
See that in my brain, that's the logical counteraction. So you've just ate a whole bunch of food that changes the neurosynapses in your brain to want shit food, and you can't control it. So what they do is they give you another drug to stop you wanting it.
So
if you wanted to make money, it's brilliant.
I need to give you a little bit of background to my 2 clients who are on Ozempic right now. So one of them has been working with me for about 1.5 years. She was one of my first ever clients, and she was a huge binge eater. So we were able to eliminate her from binge eating. She became very stable with food, which is fantastic, but she wasn't able to lose the weight. She felt uncomfortable. She did have excess weight that she was carrying, and she wanted to lose it, which I fully support 100%. But everything she was doing, there was something that wasn't matching up. So we had her go do blood tests, blah, blah, blah. Her cycle was always, from the beginning, we were talking about her cycle, and it was always out of whack. Only until, we wanted to stabilize her with food first, get her stress hormones regulated and all that kind of stuff, because stress has a huge factor in what's happening hormonally with our menstrual cycles. Turns out she has PCOS, and quite severely. So one of the first line responses to PCOS is losing weight. But you have PCOS, you have insulin resistance. It's very difficult for you to then lose weight. So she's on Ozempic to try to reverse her PCOS, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is working. She is losing weight, and basically, you know, she's married. She wants to be able to have children soon, so we need to get her ovulating regularly so she can start to track her cycle. She wants to go this route first because she also wants to lose weight, and I do support that. But the work that we've done together to eliminate her binges, I'm confident that she'll be able to kind of wean herself off and not take Ozempic, or eventually come off of it and know how to eat, because that's a whole conversation with people who are on Ozempic, because it cuts any kind of thoughts around food or impulses around food or any cravings or wants for food. What happens when you come off of Ozempic? Is that gone into hyperdrive? Are you then like, you know, you get these urges to eat that are completely out of control and you don't know what to do or how to deal with that, right? And then another one of my clients, she had metabolic syndrome. So she was carrying a lot of excess fat. That basically becomes its own organ and secreting these hormones that it was so difficult for her to lose weight. So she decided she would like to go on Ozempic, which I supported her decision. And she's gone from a size 14. She's now down to a size 10. So, you know, it's not complete, it's not drastic, but it's reasonable that she's feeling so much more confident within herself. And that's the most important thing.
I think there's going to be tons and tons of research that comes out of this, because like I said, just from the documentaries, the game is rigged against us. You know, if you indulge in these foods and they're changing the chemical makeup of your brain to be addicted, that's
and then
before
you have
you
that
get
body
on.
fat as well. Like, actually, what people don't know is that body fat itself, when you have an excess, especially visceral fat, it becomes like metabolically active in itself. So it's so difficult to lose it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got more to talk about.
Yeah.
We will come back and talk about it even more.
I love this stuff.
Before
It's so interesting.
it's really, really interesting, but like I said, nothing's separate. You know, this is the thing, you know, the food that you consume is changing the chemical makeup of your brain, and then you start getting into hormones. Like, women are complicated creatures, you know, and there's lots of things that are kind of working against us, but knowledge is power. So, you know,
Exactly.
This is why I got you on the podcast, and I will get you on again. We will keep covering it. What I might do is get you and a fertility expert as well to have, let's have a little bit of three-way conversation about the importance of nutrition when it comes to hormone regulation and, all of those factors.
That would be fun.
It would be fun. Let's do it. So finally, to before we go off, right, can you just talk to a woman on board right now, or not on board? Name a couple of red flags that maybe they should consider talking to somebody about their relationship with food. If they are, I suppose, obviously binge eating, for instance, what are the other red flags would you say you perhaps need to talk to somebody to kind of get those things under control?
Basically, if you have never been happy in your body, if you're kind of always battling with what your body looks like, and you've never been happy, and you're kind of, maybe you're doing all the right things, but you're not seeing the results that you'd expect to see, those are all red flags. If you don't have your period regularly, that's a huge red flag. If your cycle is not regular, that definitely needs to be looked at by a professional. You can start with a nutritionist or, a PT or someone, but you have to then probably get some blood work done, or definitely get some blood work done. Your hair. Has your hair been falling out recently? Are you noticing like big clumps of hair that's coming out in the shower? That's really important as well. But if someone is binge eating or having episodes of massive overeating episodes, they know it's happening, right? And it shouldn't be happening. That's not normal, but it's been something that's been happening probably your whole life, and it's not normal. And there is another way to that, and there's freedom from that, and there's You don't have to live like that, just thinking like, oh, you know, that panic if you go out for dinner thinking you're just going to be massively over consuming and you're going to feel so full and you feel so, you know, guilty and ashamed and food guilt and, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that, and oh, but tomorrow I'll be good tomorrow, I'll just have a salad for lunch tomorrow. Like, that's not normal thinking. That's not how you should be conducting your life and living your life, but that's how a lot of women do, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for coming on again. Like I said, I definitely think it's there's lots of topics that are coming up on the horizon. You know, like I said, how to help, you know, support chefs and create better working environments when it comes to nutrition on board, because basically that gets the best out of your crew. That could create crew longevity. You can keep
Saves
them for
money
longer.
for the boat.
Yeah, you know, all of these things are linked together. And I feel like that we're getting closer and closer to having conversations with industry individuals to kind of like start piecing this all together. So we will be returning to all of these topics again.
Yeah.
But thank
so
you
much
very
to talk
much.
about. Yeah.
So much to
You're
talk
welcome.
about. So much to but yes, thank you very much, Kat, for coming on again. Absolute pleasure. Ladies, if you have enjoyed this podcast episode, we have a whole bunch of others. If you've really enjoyed listening to Kat, she is amazing. She will, if you've got any problems with how you're feeling about yourself or, you know, the way you're eating and you want to kind of get it under control, please contact her. Obviously, all of the links will be below. She is a fabulous lady. We will be continuing this conversation at a later date, so I shall keep you posted. We do have the community app, and we will be announcing some events, so watch this space for the future. But in the meantime, look after yourselves, and we'll see you next time.